In the dim twilight of a distant star, the planet New Avalon emerged like a broken jewel among the cosmic void. Once heralded as humanity's final bastion of hope in the outer colonies, New Avalon now lay scarred and trembling under the oppressive shadow of the Galactic Empire. Its vibrant fields, once teeming with life and promise, had become silent graveyards of defiance and shattered dreams. Remnants of colonist structures jutted out from beneath layers of dust and ruin, each a muted testament to a time when resistance was as perilous as it was necessary. A battered spacecraft bearing the proud insignia of the United Colonies descended slowly onto the scarred surface of New Avalon. Its pilot, Commander Elias Drake, peered through the viewport as the desolate panorama unfolded below. His mind raced with the gravity of his mission, to unearth the truth behind the massacre that had extinguished 50,000 colonist lives, and to confront a regime whose cruelty left nothing but ashes in its wake. "Every step we take here is a step into their nightmare," murmured Lieutenant Mara Hayes, his co-pilot, her voice low with restrained urgency. The ship's engines hummed a constant reminder of the fragile hope that still flickered amid despair as they touched down at a ruined spaceport where the scars of brutal conflict were etched into every shattered wall. Stepping out onto the cracked ground, the duo was met with a landscape where silence reigned, a silence broken only by the howling wind carrying hints of burnt ozone and scorched metal. Here and there, graffiti and hurried etchings on debris told stories of brave souls who had once risen against tyranny. Commander Drake's eyes narrowed as he observed a wall marred with defiant symbols and heartfelt inscriptions. Each mark was a relic of resistance, a silent vow that even in the face of annihilation, the human spirit refused to be erased. They moved cautiously along pathways choked by debris and memories. Amid the detritus, small personal effects, a child's toy, a faded photograph, a handwritten note, spoke volumes of lives abruptly silenced. "These were not mere numbers," Drake whispered, his tone heavy with sorrow and resolve. "Each of these relics is a story that deserves to be told." Lieutenant Hayes knelt before a half-buried memorial stone, her gloved fingers tracing the worn, desperate script that read, "In our final stand, we embraced life even in death." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she absorbed the painful beauty of that final message. The Galactic Empire had justified the brutal massacre as a necessary measure to quell insurrection, a preemptive strike to maintain order in a volatile sector. Yet as Drake recorded the devastation with his portable datapad, inconsistencies began to emerge. There were signs of miscommunication, gaps in the official narrative, and subtle hints that the massacre might have been a catastrophic error, rather than the cold, calculated punishment that had been proclaimed. A sense of foreboding crept into his thoughts. If the massacre had been a mistake, then the implications for both the Empire and humanity were profound and potentially explosive. Before the fading light surrendered to an unsettling twilight, the pair discovered an abandoned command center buried beneath shifting sands. Its sealed corridors beckoned like a cryptic puzzle box, promising hidden archives and records that could expose the true sequence of events. "If we can recover even a fraction of what lies inside, we might rewrite the narrative," Drake said, determination edged with apprehension. His words hung in the heavy air as they exchanged a resolute nod, each aware that every step forward was a venture into an uncertain, perilous labyrinth of treachery. High on a ridge overlooking the devastated colony, Drake and Hayes paused to absorb the full magnitude of their discovery. Below them, under the spectral glow of a distant nebula, the remnants of New Avalon flickered like dying embers scattered across the darkness. In that suspended moment, Commander Drake's low voice broke the silence. "This isn't simply about retribution. It's about exposing the truth behind a tragedy that could shatter the fragile balance of power in the galaxy." His declaration resonated as both a promise and a warning. The seeds of a rebellion, nurtured in grief and forged in the fires of injustice, had been sown. Thus, beneath a star-strewn sky that bore silent witness to human resilience, the first chapter of a saga began, a tale of shattered hope, hidden truths, and the relentless quest for justice that would soon echo across the cosmos. Inside the ancient command center, darkness reigned with an eerie solemnity. The corridor, once bustling with imperial orders and strategic deliberations, now lay in ruins, its walls scarred by the passage of time and neglect. Commander Drake and Lieutenant Hayes advanced with measured caution, their portable illuminators slicing through the dense gloom. The silence was nearly absolute, broken only by the low hum of dormant machinery and the soft echoes of their measured footsteps. They reached a vast archive room where rows of sealed data vaults loomed like sentinels guarding forbidden secrets. The space was a collision of futuristic design and crumbling neglect. Advanced consoles, their surfaces etched with digital hieroglyphs, stood in stark contrast to the decay that had overtaken the facility. Lieutenant Hayes approached one of the ancient control panels, her gloved fingers brushing away layers of dust to reveal cryptic markings. "This is where they stored everything, transmissions, orders, even the voices of those who witnessed the massacre," she murmured, her tone a mix of awe and apprehension. Drake's eyes narrowed as he tapped into a terminal. "The encryption is archaic, but it's still our best lead. We need to uncover the unedited records to determine if this was truly a deliberate strike or a catastrophic error." He initiated a sequence that sent ripples of digital code cascading across the holographic interface. Slowly, fragmented files began to materialize, a chaotic mosaic of communications and confidential memos. Among the scattered data, a particular file caught his attention. It was marked with a red warning symbol and a timestamp that predated the massacre by mere hours. As the file unfurled in a cascade of holographic script, the contents revealed a disquieting internal debate among Imperial officers. "System malfunction, coordinates compromised, unintended engagement," read one message, while another insisted, "Suppress this anomaly. The narrative must remain intact." Drake's voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't an act of cold, calculated punishment. It was a catastrophic error, a mistake that cost 50,000 lives." The deeper they delved, the more discrepancies emerged. Files once thought lost or erased reappeared as encrypted fragments, hinting at the deliberate obfuscation of the truth. Amid the digital debris, Hayes discovered a series of personal logs from a mid-level officer whose doubts about the operation grew with every corrupted data stream. The officer's hesitant words painted a picture of a man trapped between duty and conscience, forced to comply with orders that gnawed at his soul. "I never meant for it to be this way," the log read, the digital echo of regret resonating with each repeated word. Their investigation was abruptly interrupted by a sudden clatter in the far recesses of the archive room. Both officers paused, instincts on high alert. "Did you hear that?" Hayes asked, her voice barely audible as she reached for the blaster holstered at her side. The sound of shuffling steps and the creak of old metal sent a jolt through the stagnant air. From behind a collapsed data rack emerged a gaunt figure, his features half hidden in shadow and decay. "I am the keeper of these lost records," the stranger rasped, his eyes darting nervously between them. His uniform, tattered and faded, bore the insignia of the very institution that now lay in ruins. Drake stepped forward, his tone cautious yet firm. "Who are you, and how have you survived in a place abandoned for years?" The man hesitated, then spoke in a low, measured cadence. "I was once entrusted with the archive, a custodian of the Empire's hidden truths. When the massacre occurred, I saw the error in our systems and fled before I was forced to silence my doubts." His confession carried the weight of decades spent in solitude and remorse. "I've been preserving these records, waiting for someone who could piece together what was lost. I feared the day the Empire would come looking for the truth, and today, it seems that day has arrived." With the mysterious custodian's reluctant guidance, Drake and Hayes ventured deeper into the vault. The corridor beyond was even more decrepit, the walls adorned with cryptic murals and warnings left by those who once sought justice. The stranger led them to a heavily secured section of the archive, where the most sensitive files lay hidden. "This data is the linchpin," he whispered. "Within these records is evidence of a fatal miscalculation, a misalignment of coordinates that turned a routine strike into a massacre. The orders were altered at the last minute, and the mistake was covered up with ruthless efficiency. Drake absorbed every word, his resolve hardening. If we can retrieve these records and broadcast them, we will expose not only the cruelty of this act, but also the negligence that allowed it to happen. Hayes, her eyes glistening with a mixture of sorrow and determination, nodded. We must be meticulous. The Empire's enforcers will not hesitate to erase this evidence if they learn of our presence. As the trio worked to decrypt the final layer of data, the archive room itself seemed to come alive with echoes of the past. Faded holograms and scattered audio logs intertwined, forming a disjointed symphony of voices, a collective lament of those who had perished. In that moment, the room was more than just a repository of forgotten records. It was a shrine to the human spirit, resilient even in the face of overwhelming tyranny. Yet, as the decrypted files began to reveal the truth, an undercurrent of tension filled the air. Each new fragment of evidence not only confirmed the catastrophic error, but also hinted at a broader conspiracy, one that involved high-ranking officers who manipulated the data to serve their own ambitions. The implications were staggering. The massacre was not simply an accident. It was a deliberate cover-up designed to consolidate power within the Galactic Empire at the expense of innocent lives. In the dim light of the archive, as the trio pieced together the fractured narrative of that fateful day, a grim determination took hold. Drake's voice, resolute and low, echoed softly. We have to bring this truth to light. The people deserve to know what really happened on New Avalon. Hayes tightened her grip on the data drive, her eyes reflecting both the pain of loss and the promise of retribution. The keeper of records faded back into the shadows, his role complete, as if he too were a relic of a bygone era. Thus, within the silent, haunted corridors of a forgotten archive, the spark of rebellion was rekindled. Every decrypted word, every uncovered secret was a step toward justice, a step that would soon echo throughout the galaxy, igniting the flames of resistance against an empire built on lies and bloodshed. The vault's secrets had just begun to spill out when an insidious alarm shattered the quiet. The sound of hidden sensors activating and metal groaning in protest reverberated through the corridors. Drake, Hayes, and the enigmatic custodian exchanged tense glances as the previously dormant facility awoke in a cacophony of warning signals. The holographic records that had detailed the catastrophic error blinked uncertainly before plunging the room into sporadic flashes of red. We have to move now, Drake commanded, his voice steely as he snatched the portable data drive from Hayes. The weight of evidence pressed on them like an omen, each heartbeat syncing with the rising urgency in the alarms. Without hesitation, they split into the twisting maze of the decaying command center. The custodian, his face lined with years of remorse and hidden truths, led the way into a narrow passage obscured by fallen debris. Every footstep echoed ominously against the cold, scarred walls, and the stale air was tinged with the metallic scent of fear and decay. This corridor should lead us to an exit, Drake murmured as he navigated the labyrinthine passageways with the practiced certainty of someone who had memorized the building's layout during quieter times. The corridors were a tangle of old service ducts, collapsed archways, and long-forgotten murals. A stark reminder that even the mighty Galactic Empire's bastions could crumble into obscurity. A distant clatter confirmed that they were not alone. The sound of heavy boots and clashing metal grew louder with each passing moment. Hayes crouched behind a fractured wall, her gloved hand tightening around her sidearm. Over here, she whispered, pointing to a narrow opening behind a fallen support beam. With a silent nod, the trio merged into the cramped passage, hearts pounding in unison as they tried to outpace the encroaching threat. The ancient corridors twisted unexpectedly. A dead end here, a hidden passage there. At one junction, the custodian halted abruptly in front of a mural etched into the crumbling wall. Faded symbols and the image of a long-forgotten guardian figure were barely visible beneath layers of grime and time. This mark denotes a secret escape route, he rasped. voice trembling as if the walls themselves carried the sorrows of past rebellions. Drake squinted at the faded emblem. "It might lead us to the service shafts. Follow me." His tone brooked no argument as he pushed open a heavy, rusted door, revealing a passage lined with ancient control panels and emergency lights that sputtered uncertainly. Inside, the oppressive silence was punctuated by the echo of distant mechanical whirs and the rhythmic clanging of approaching Imperial enforcers. Drake's mind raced as he plotted the quickest route through the maze. The corridors, once the heart of a formidable military facility, now resembled the innards of a derelict beast, its decaying bones exposed to the cold vacuum of neglect. Every step was fraught with peril. Unstable flooring, exposed conduits sparking with residual energy, and shadowed recesses where danger might be lurking. In a particularly narrow corridor, Hayes paused as she overheard a hushed conversation echoing from around a corner. Two guards spoke in anxious whispers, their words laden with a mix of dread and fervor. "They have the files," one hissed, "and if those records see the light, the Emperor's whole facade will crumble." The implication was chilling. The Empire was not only aware of their breach, but also desperate to snuff out the evidence before it could ignite a full-scale rebellion. Hayes pressed a trembling finger to her comlink, her voice barely audible as she relayed the intel to Drake. "They're coming for us, and they know the stakes." With that, Drake steeled himself. "We need to divide and cover more ground. Hayes, take the left corridor and secure the exit. I'll head right and try to loop back to rendezvous with you." The custodian nodded silently, disappearing into the shadows as if he were nothing more than a ghost of the past entrusted with a final desperate duty. Their brief exchange was cut short by the ominous sound of approaching footsteps that grew ever louder, a relentless tide of Imperial enforcers closing in. Drake sprinted down the right-hand passage, every muscle tensed with urgency. The corridor led him to a vast, crumbling atrium crowned with a shattered dome that allowed the cold light of distant stars to pierce the gloom. In that cavernous space, time seemed to suspend as he scanned for potential escape routes. A heavy boot thudded on the stone floor behind him, and without pausing, he ducked behind a ruined column, the echo of energy blasts ricocheting off shattered walls. In the interplay of light and shadow, each step was both a risk and a testament to human resolve. Meanwhile, Hayes navigated her own perilous route. The narrow corridor she took twisted into a labyrinth of interconnected service tunnels. The air grew colder and thinner, the sound of her own labored breathing amplified by the oppressive silence. Every step was a reminder that even in the ruins of the Empire's might, their mission, to reveal the truth, was a beacon of hope amid the encroaching darkness. As she reached a junction, she paused to listen, heart pounding with the realization that every second was a chance for the Empire to silence them forever. Back in the atrium, Drake's eyes caught the glint of a half-collapsed metal door marked with the same emblem from the mural. "This must be it," he whispered, pushing the door open to reveal an even narrower corridor that might lead to an emergency exit. The corridor's walls were adorned with remnants of old propaganda posters, their faded messages a bittersweet reminder of a time when hope had not yet been snuffed out. With a final surge of determination, Drake plunged into the passage, the evidence secure at his side, and the promise of exposing the Empire's dark secret, burning like a beacon in his mind. In the echoing corridors of the labyrinthine command center, each step forward was a defiant stand against oppression, a desperate, dangerous bid to bring the hidden truth into the light no matter the cost. Emerging from the claustrophobic labyrinth, Drake and Hayes found themselves in a narrow service corridor lit by intermittent, sputtering neon strips. The stale air, heavy with dust and lingering tension, whispered of secrets long buried. Their hearts pounded in unison as they navigated the winding passage, a fragile artery connecting the ruins of the command center to an uncertain future. Every echo of their footsteps was a stark reminder that the Empire's enforcers were close behind, their presence a relentless specter in the silence. Hayes's voice, barely above a whisper, broke the oppressive quiet. "Drake, Do you see that flickering panel on the wall? She pointed toward a concealed access door, half hidden behind twisted cables and shattered consoles. With cautious precision, Drake approached and ran a gloved hand along the cold metal surface, feeling for a latch or any sign of tampering. "It's an old override interface," he murmured. "If we can get this open, it might lead us to the outpost mentioned in the records." A soft beep confirmed their success as the door slid open, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. The passage was less chaotic, its walls lined with remnants of a bygone era, a mosaic of faded insignias, murals of defiant rebellion, and cryptic symbols hinting at hope amid despair. The corridor's calm belied the danger lurking outside its walls, as if it were a secret haven in the heart of the Empire's abandoned vestiges. Drake led the way, the data drive clutched tightly in his hand. Every step was deliberate, every shadow a potential ambush. "We have to assume the worst," he said, his tone steady. "The Empire will mobilize every resource to erase these records. Our window is narrow." Hayes nodded, her eyes scanning the dark recesses for movement. "I'm picking up faint comm chatter on my sidearm," she reported softly, her fingers dancing over the controls. "They're organizing a perimeter patrol. We can't linger." Before long, the corridor opened into a vast atrium that housed what had once been a strategic outpost, a relic from the early days of the Empire's expansion, now transformed into a silent sanctuary of forgotten battles. Massive archways framed the space, where shattered columns and rusted scaffolding spoke of former glory and current neglect. The air here was cooler, imbued with a sense of latent purpose, as if the walls themselves remembered the sacrifices made in their honor. It was in this somber chamber that Drake and Hayes encountered a scattering of figures, a small contingent of resistance fighters who had long sought refuge in the abandoned outpost. Their faces, marked by both determination and weariness, turned as one toward the intruders. A grizzled leader with steely eyes stepped forward, his voice resonating with both authority and caution. "Identify yourselves," he demanded, hand hovering near his sidearm. Drake's response was measured and deliberate. "We're not your enemies. We carry evidence that the massacre on New Avalon was not a calculated suppression, but a grave mistake. We need your help to expose the truth and bring justice." The leader's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the only sound was the distant hum of failing generators and the soft rustle of shifting debris. After a tense pause, he gestured to a shadowed alcove. "I am Captain Joran. If what you say holds truth, then come with us. But tread carefully. There are ears everywhere, and the Empire does not forgive betrayal lightly." As they followed Captain Joran through a series of interconnected passageways, Hayes whispered, "This outpost has been a silent witness to the Empire's follies for years. I've heard rumors, whispers of a hidden rebel network that's been gathering intelligence on high-ranking officials." Drake's gaze hardened with resolve. "Then it's time we bring that network into the light. The truth we carry here isn't just about a mistake. It's about accountability. If we can rally the right people, this could be the spark that ignites a full-scale uprising." In a makeshift command room lined with salvaged screens and repurposed consoles, Captain Joran introduced them to a council of rebel operatives. Among them, a young strategist named Lyra offered a quiet smile as she reviewed the decrypted files on a flickering holoprojector. "Your evidence disrupts the official narrative," she observed. "It reveals that the orders were modified at the last minute, a correction to what should have been a routine operation. This error, as catastrophic as it was, could have been prevented if not for the greed and corruption that now poison the Empire's core." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Drake's grip on the data drive tightened as he recounted the discoveries from the archive. "We found logs, personal confessions, and direct orders, all pointing to a hasty decision that cost 50,000 innocent lives. It wasn't a ruthless execution to quash dissent. It was a miscalculation, covered up to preserve the Empire's image of control." His words hung in the air like a clarion call to a suppressed spirit, resonating with every person in the room. Outside, the sounds of patrolling enforcers grew louder, a reminder that time was slipping away. Captain Joran's tone shifted to urgency. We have limited time before the Empire's recon teams sweep this sector. Our plan must be swift. Transmit this evidence to every colony and central rebel cell. The truth will rally the people and force the Empire to confront its own corruption. Hayes exchanged a determined look with Drake. Then we move now, she said. Every second counts. As the Council scrambled to establish secure channels for transmission, the outpost's ancient walls seemed to pulse with renewed purpose. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, a precarious balance between the looming threat of retribution and the burgeoning promise of a new dawn. In that decisive moment, as rebel operatives prepared to broadcast the irrefutable evidence, Drake realized that they stood at the threshold of an irreversible turning point. Their actions, driven by the unyielding human spirit, were about to expose a truth so profound that it could shatter the Empire's foundation. With one final nod of solidarity, the rebels initiated the transmission. The data surged through encrypted channels into the heart of the Resistance network, carrying with it the power to turn whispers of injustice into a roaring tide of retribution. In that instant, as the evidence left the confines of the hidden outpost, the prelude to a galaxy-wide upheaval was set in motion, a prelude to an uprising born from the ashes of a shattered regime. A tremor of resolve ran through the rebel outpost as the transmission's encrypted signal pulsed steadily into the far reaches of human space. In the dim light of salvaged monitors and flickering holograms, Captain Joran's council huddled around a rough-hewn table. The evidence was irrefutable, a harrowing digital testament to a massacre that had been masked by a bureaucratic error, a miscalculation turned into mass murder. Amid murmurs of disbelief and quiet fury, a single proposal cut through the clamor. A diplomatic envoy should be dispatched to the Imperial throne world to demand accountability and seek redress. Who among us will carry the truth to their doorstep? Captain Joran asked, his voice echoing in the silent urgency of the room. All eyes fell on Commander Elias Drake, whose steeled gaze had long been fixed on exposing the Empire's corruption. Yet Drake, though burdened by the weight of his discoveries, hesitated. I have seen enough to know that confrontation will spark a fire we may not control, he murmured, his tone laced with both resolve and concern. It was then that Lyra, the young strategist with a quiet intensity, stepped forward. We need someone who can navigate both the political labyrinth and the perilous expanse between our worlds. My recommendation is Ambassador Silas Reed. His experience in diplomacy and battlefield negotiation makes him the ideal envoy. Silas Reed, a gaunt but determined figure with a reputation for unwavering honesty, accepted the charge with a measured nod. I will carry this truth, not as a weapon of vengeance, but as a call for accountability, he declared, his voice firm yet laced with sorrow for the innocent lives lost. With the Rebel Council's reluctant blessing and secret support from the network of resistance cells, Reed embarked on his journey, a solitary shuttle launching beneath the cover of an inky void. The voyage to the Imperial throne world was perilous. Silas's shuttle, sleek and cloaked in stealth technology, slipped silently through contested space as Imperial patrols prowled the trade lanes. Every burst of static on the comms and every sudden jolt of the vessel heightened his awareness of lurking danger. In the quiet hum of the engine, Reed's thoughts churned with memories of his own losses, families torn apart by unchecked power, and an inner fire that bolstered his determination. This message must reach them, he whispered to himself, as if the darkness itself could carry his plea for justice. As Reed neared the outskirts of the Empire's core territory, sensors detected a small fleet of Imperial interceptors. The shuttle's alarms blared a sharp warning. Reed's fingers danced over the controls, recalculating evasive trajectories and cloaking protocols. A terse communication crackled through the channel. Identify yourself. Unauthorized vessel, an imperious voice demanded. Reed responded calmly. Diplomatic clearance. Urgent envoy en route to the throne world. Request passage for a matter of state. A beat of silence followed, before the voice replied with cold formality. State security will verify. Stand by. The minutes stretched into a tense eternity as Reed's eyes darted across the instrument panel, his pulse matching the rhythmic beeps of the navigation system. Finally, the hostile fleet relented, and the shuttle was granted a narrow corridor through the Imperial blockade. Emerging into a vast, controlled sector near the capital, the shuttle's sensors captured breathtaking yet disquieting vistas. Colossal spires of obsidian metal interlaced with streams of pulsating neon, and an ever-watchful sky bristling with defense satellites. The Imperial city sprawled beneath like a high-tech labyrinth of power and oppression, a stark reminder of the Empire's might, but also of its fragility in the face of truth. Reed's shuttle descended slowly toward a secure landing platform on the outskirts of the capital, its landing gear absorbing the impact with a muted thud. On the platform, Reed was met by a cadre of uniformed guards whose eyes betrayed both suspicion and calculated deference. "Ambassador Reed, state your business," one demanded, his tone clipped and clinical. Reed's reply was measured, deliberate. "I come bearing evidence of a grave error, a catastrophic miscalculation that led to the execution of 50,000 colonists. I demand an audience with your highest council to seek redress for this injustice." His words hung in the cool, recycled air, charged with the audacity of a lone voice challenging a vast regime. The guards exchanged glances, and for a moment the platform seemed to hold its breath. Behind them, the Imperial city loomed as both a monument to order and a potential tinderbox of rebellion. Reed's heart pounded not only with the peril of his mission, but also with the dawning realization that his words could ignite a revolution. As he was escorted toward the imposing government complex, every step resonated with the gravity of his task, a journey not just to demand justice, but to awaken a galaxy teetering on the brink of retribution. The grand chamber of the Imperial High Council exuded an oppressive aura of refined opulence and cold authority. Gleaming obsidian walls, inset with swirling constellations of holographic data, framed a long dais where the council members sat like stone-faced arbiters. Silas Reed, escorted by two stern Imperial aides, was led through towering archways into a room where the air vibrated with restrained tension. Every step he took echoed like a prelude to a reckoning long overdue. At the dais, the Imperial High Council, a collection of austere figures in meticulously tailored uniforms, watched with a mix of skepticism and barely concealed disdain. The head of the council, Chancellor Voren, a gaunt man with piercing eyes, inclined his head as Reed approached. "Ambassador Reed, state your purpose," he intoned, his voice measured and icy. Reed's hand tightened around a datapad containing the damning evidence. "Honorable Council," he began, his tone calm but resolute, "I have come bearing incontrovertible proof that the execution of 50,000 colonists was not a deliberate act of suppression, but the result of a catastrophic error, a miscalculation compounded by a willful cover-up." His words reverberated across the chamber, silencing murmurs that threatened to break the fragile decorum. A counselor with a furrowed brow interjected, "Your claims undermine the stability of our order. Explain how such a mistake could occur under our command." Reed met the gaze steadily. "The records recovered from New Avalon and the subsequent decryption of Imperial archives reveal that orders were altered in haste. In the final hours before the operation, a critical coordinate error redirected our strikes, resulting in the mass execution of innocent colonists. This was not a calculated measure against insurrection, but a tragic oversight that has cost thousands their lives." A tense silence followed as holographic logs flickered into life behind Reed, displaying timestamps, internal memos, and personal confessions from mid-level officers. One faded voice, captured in static, murmured, "I never intended for it to escalate this way." The displayed evidence spoke of bureaucratic chaos and moral compromise, a narrative that threatened to unravel the Empire's proud veneer. Chancellor Voren's expression darkened. "These records are suspect," he accused, leaning forward. "They could be fabricated by dissidents seeking to sow discord." Reed's reply was measured yet incisive. "The data has been authenticated through multiple secure channels. Denying the truth would only deepen the fissures within your regime. for the people across our territories demand accountability. This evidence is not merely a recounting of events, it is a mirror reflecting your own failures. A murmur rippled among the counselors. One, a silver-haired official with tired eyes, spoke quietly. If what you say is true, then the repercussions extend beyond a simple mistake. They would suggest an inherent corruption at the highest levels. Reed's gaze swept across the room, meeting both defiant and doubtful eyes. I do not come to incite chaos, but to demand that you acknowledge the error and initiate reparative measures, he stated. For too long, the Empire has relied on fear and secrecy. Justice demands transparency, and without it, the foundation of our civilization is doomed to crumble. The atmosphere grew increasingly charged. A counselor, voice low and threatening, declared, "You jeopardize not only our honor, but the stability of the galaxy itself by airing these grievances in this forum." Reed's response was equally firm. Stability built on falsehoods is brittle. The truth, however painful, is the only path to genuine order. The people deserve to know that their suffering was not the product of a cold, calculated strategy, but of human error. An error that must be rectified before it ignites further dissent. For long moments, the room seemed suspended in time as the council wrestled with the gravity of Reed's words and the weight of irrefutable data. The aides exchanged anxious glances, while Chancellor Voren's eyes narrowed in contemplative fury. Finally, the head of the council spoke in a tone that mixed both reluctant concession and steely resolve. "Your evidence demands an investigation," he pronounced slowly. "But be warned, Ambassador Reed, any attempt to leverage this truth for sedition will be met with the full might of the Empire." Reed inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I seek not rebellion but justice," he replied, voice unwavering. "We stand at a precipice. A decision made here will echo throughout every colony, every star system that has suffered under our rule. I urge you to set aside pride and accept accountability before this grave mistake births consequences far beyond what any one of us can control." In that charged moment, as the holographic records continued their silent testimony, the chamber became a battleground of ideologies, a final confrontation between an empire desperate to maintain its image and a lone envoy determined to unearth the truth. The room, filled with the subtle hum of ancient machinery and the weight of centuries of power, bore witness to a turning point. In the heart of imperial authority, the seeds of change were sown, promising that the dark legacy of the massacre might yet be transformed into a new, albeit turbulent, dawn. After the cold, calculated deliberation of the Imperial Council, Reed was escorted back into the sprawling corridors of the government complex. The echo of his impassioned words still lingered in the marble halls, mingling with the murmur of distant discontent. Outside, the polished veneer of imperial authority began to crack, as news of the envoy's revelations rippled through the controlled data streams and clandestine channels. In the shadowed recesses of the capital's underbelly, Commander Drake's voice resonated urgently over a secure comlink. "The Council's concessions are nothing but a facade," he declared, his tone a mix of determination and dread. "We're intercepting messages. There's unrest in the ranks. Our people are beginning to question the orders they once obeyed without thought. This is the spark we need." His words, transmitted over a network of rebel cells, ignited whispers in outlying colonies and inner-city sectors alike. Across the galaxy, isolated outposts and bustling metropolises pulsed with a newfound urgency. Citizens, once silenced by the Empire's iron grip, now whispered of the massacre's hidden truth. A leaked recording of a mid-level officer's trembling confession had surged through underground networks. "We lost control. A mistake turned into a massacre. 50,000 lives snuffed out by a miscalculation and a cover-up." That single, harrowing admission resonated with the disenfranchised, fanning the embers of rebellion. Meanwhile, in the heart of imperial power, Chancellor Voren convened a secret emergency meeting with his most trusted aides. In a richly appointed chamber, its walls adorned with holographic emblems of the regime, Voren's steely gaze swept over his anxious council. "This scandal must be expunged," he ordered, his voice low and foreboding. We will identify and silence those who have allowed this evidence to see the light. The integrity of our rule depends on it." His aides exchanged uncertain glances, each silently acknowledging that the regime's unyielding facade was now under threat from within. Back at the rebel outpost, the atmosphere was charged with a blend of hope and impending danger. Captain Joran addressed the gathered resistance fighters in a makeshift command room cluttered with salvaged tech and flickering monitors. "The Empire's foundations are trembling," he stated, his voice carrying both resolve and urgency. "Every new piece of evidence, every whispered confession, is a weapon against the tyrants. We must seize this moment to build alliances, both among us and within their own ranks. We are not alone." His words were met with fervent nods and determined expressions, as operatives scrambled to secure further transmissions and rally sympathetic elements across the galaxy. In a secluded corridor of the Imperial capital, Reed found a rare moment of solitude. His footsteps echoed on polished stone as he recalled a fleeting conversation with a disillusioned counselor, a woman whose eyes betrayed the heavy cost of obedience. "We serve a regime built on lies," she had whispered, her voice trembling with sorrow before disappearing into the maze of bureaucracy. That moment had kindled a stubborn hope in him. If even one soul of power could see the truth, perhaps the Empire's iron grip could be loosened. As the night deepened, the Empire's security apparatus began to mobilize with alarming intensity. Squadrons of sleek fighter ships streaked across the inky sky above the capital, their red searchlights slicing through darkness as they patrolled with ruthless precision. On the streets, armored units marched in tight formation, their presence a stark warning to any who might dare dissent. Yet even within the ranks of these enforcers, murmurs of uncertainty and quiet defiance began to surface. An Imperial officer, his uniform immaculate but his eyes shadowed with conflict, confided to a comrade in hushed tones, "It feels as if the truth is a wildfire we can't contain. People are waking up, and soon there may be no turning back." Within the rebel command center, Lyra's steady voice broke the tense silence as alerts began to flood in from scattered nodes. "We're detecting crackdowns on key rebel cells. Targets include not only our network, but also civilian sectors suspected of dissent," she announced, her eyes fixed on rapidly changing data. "We must safeguard our evidence and our allies at all costs." Drake's response was resolute, imbued with the raw energy of a people on the brink of liberation. "The Empire's attempts to silence us only stoke the flames of resistance. Our truth is the light that will guide the oppressed to freedom." At dawn, the Imperial skyline was transformed by a breathtaking yet ominous display of colors. Streaks of crimson and gold bled into the horizon, heralding a new day laden with both promise and peril. Reed, standing at the fringes of the government complex, gazed at the horizon as the first light unveiled a city in turmoil. The Empire, once a monolith of invincible order, now teetered on the edge of a revolution. In every whispered conversation, in every coded message transmitted in the dead of night, the seeds of dissent had been sown. As the people prepared to rise against the oppression that had for too long masked the Empire's brutal mistakes, the catalyst of rebellion was unmistakably in motion. With every heart ignited by the truth and every soldier, officer, and citizen caught in the crossfire of revelation and tyranny, the galaxy stood poised on the precipice of profound change. The Empire's harsh reality had finally been laid bare, and the ensuing uprising promised to reshape the future in the flames of resistance. In the early hours before dawn, the galaxy trembled on the brink of transformation. The rebel forces, emboldened by the leaked evidence and growing discontent within the Imperial ranks, had converged on the central hub of the Empire, a vast, sprawling complex that housed the nerve center of its power. Outside, the Imperial capital was alive with a simmering tension, as thousands of voices, once muted by oppression, now roared with a desperate hope for justice. Commander Drake, standing on a ruined balcony overlooking the capital's main square, surveyed the assembled masses. Flickering holographic banners streamed images of the lost colonists and their damning testimonies, projected in defiant bursts against the morning sky. Today we claim our truth, he declared over the comlink, his voice echoing with both authority and resolve. No longer will our grief be buried beneath lies. We demand accountability, and we will no longer cower in fear. Inside the Imperial complex, Chancellor Vorin and his council scrambled to maintain a semblance of order. The corridors, once symbols of unyielding control, now pulsed with urgent whispers and hurried footsteps. The holographic displays that had once broadcast the Empire's propaganda now flickered with raw, unfiltered evidence, the same data that Ambassador Reed had laid bare in the council chamber. In a last-ditch effort to quash dissent, Vorin ordered an immediate lockdown, unaware that his commands were already being intercepted by sympathizers within his own ranks. Ambassador Silas Reed, having survived his tense confrontation with the High Council, now moved through the labyrinthine corridors with a mix of caution and determination. Every step brought him closer to a secure terminal where the rebels would finalize the broadcast of the incriminating evidence. As he pressed forward, he encountered a small cadre of Imperial officers whose eyes betrayed conflict and regret. One such officer, his uniform immaculate, yet his gaze haunted, halted him. "Ambassador, I cannot stand by any longer," the officer admitted in a hushed tone. "I have seen the truth in those files. I believe our people deserve to know, even if it means dismantling everything we built." Reed nodded solemnly. "Your courage will help restore honor to this decaying regime. Join us in exposing the error and the corruption that have poisoned our society." Outside, the rebel fleet soared above the capital, their stealth ships and commandeered transports uniting in a protective ring around the city. On the ground, hundreds of protesters had gathered, brandishing signs that demanded justice for the 50,000 and for all those silenced by the Empire's mistakes. The air was thick with a mixture of determination and trepidation, as if the very stars were holding their breath. The rebels had coordinated meticulously, synchronizing their efforts to seize control of the city's communications array. Their objective was clear: to broadcast the irrefutable evidence across every corner of human space, leaving the Empire no room to hide behind manufactured narratives. In the heart of the Imperial complex, Reed reached the designated control room, a chamber once reserved for the highest secrets of state. With the help of sympathetic officers and skilled hackers who had infiltrated the Empire's inner networks, he initiated the final sequence. Data streams surged onto the central holodisplay, overwhelming the countermeasures that had been installed to suppress such revelations. The room was bathed in the unyielding light of truth, as files, timestamps, and raw recordings filled every screen. For a moment, there was a heavy silence as both rebels and Imperial loyalists watched the damning evidence unfold before their eyes. A sudden alarm shattered the stillness, and the room erupted into chaos. Reinforcements from the Imperial security forces poured into the chamber, their orders clashing with the newfound spirit of dissent. Blaster fire echoed off the cold metal walls as loyalists attempted to seize control of the terminal. In the midst of the tumult, Reed's calm voice rang out over the comm system. "Let the truth be known." His declaration reverberated through every corridor, every data pad, and every soul connected to the network. The broadcast was complete. The massacre, the error, and the cover-up were laid bare for all to see. Across the capital, the broadcast ignited an irreversible chain reaction. Crowds surged through the streets, their anger and sorrow merging into an unstoppable force of rebellion. Imperial outposts, once thought impregnable, fell one by one as defectors and protesters overwhelmed the defenses. Chancellor Vorin's panicked commands fell on deaf ears as his own officers, emboldened by the evidence, began to question their loyalty. In the final moments of confrontation, Vorin appeared on a grand holographic screen, his visage a mask of desperation and rage. "This is not the end," he warned, voice trembling with the weight of impending downfall. "Order will be restored, even if it must be enforced." But his words rang hollow against the resounding call for justice. With every passing second, the Empire's grip loosened, its dark legacy unraveling under the brilliant light of truth. As dawn broke over the capital, The rebellion had become a revolution, a reckoning that promised to reshape the galaxy. Commander Drake, Ambassador Reed, and the countless souls who had dared to stand for what was right now looked to a future where the scars of the past would serve as a foundation for a more transparent and humane order. The final reckoning had begun, and with it the promise that even the darkest empire could be overthrown by the relentless, unyielding spirit of humanity.